Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Roth IAMS webinar. We're just going to give it a few more minutes until people join, and then we'll get started with our presentation today on multivariable prioritization. Okay, folks, we're going to get going. It looks like we've got a good group of people here. As I said, today's presentation is going to be on multivariable prioritization. And we will be sending the deck and the video link out after the webinar so folks can have access to that. We'll be running a few poll questions throughout the webinar, so please do participate in those. And then, of course, we will have a survey at the end, so we always appreciate you participating in that and letting us know how we're doing. At the end of Alicia's presentation, there will be time for Q&A, so please put them in the chat and we'll get going. So I will turn it over now to Alicia McLean is your presenter today. She's our National Sales Director at Roth IAMS, and she helps organizations like yours with strategies, tools, and solutions to help you make your data-informed decisions and tell your asset management story. So I'll turn it over to you now, Alicia.
Thank you, Amanda, and good afternoon, everyone. Happy to have you here and be presenting. Before we hop into the presentation, I just want to note that our previous webinars are typically, if you've attended them before, have a very educational approach to them. This one, with myself being the sales director, is going to have a little bit more of a sales focus on it. You may notice that we've done a presentation on the past on which high is higher than high. And if you're interested on the more educational version of that, it is available on our thought leadership page. But we'll dive into the agenda for today. So we've already gone through introductions. We'll talk a little bit about some considerations before you get into priority. We'll talk about how we see some of the organizations that we work with, how they go about prioritization. And then we'll talk about the Roth IAMS methodology behind multivariable prioritization, and then just some considerations at the end of the day, because it's never an all-in-one solution. So just to give you a little bit of a background on Roth IAMS as an organization, if you haven't worked with us before or attended one of our webinars, our entire company is designed around services that are going to help organizations within the public sector to deal with the deferred capital renewal and maintenance backlog crisis. So many of you are managing buildings that are aging, and the systems within those buildings are coming to the end of their expected useful life. You likely have a long list of deferred capital renewal and maintenance work that needs to be completed, and likely don't have the budget to complete all the work that needs to be done. So our services are here to sort of help you get data on that deferred capital renewal and maintenance backlog, and then help you tell that asset management story so you can hopefully advocate for more funding, or at the very least, spend the limited capital dollars that you do have a little bit more effectively. I often get asked at conferences what the IAMS stands for in Roth IAMS, and it stands for Integrated Asset Management Strategies. So what we mean by that is really about finding that sweet spot between capital planning excellence, operational excellence, and performance excellence. Today with the MVP, we're really talking about that capital planning excellence piece of the equation. And then just from a company portfolio standpoint, we're over, I think we're up to about 120 staff across Canada and the US. We've worked with over 59 municipalities, over 17 district school boards. We recently won the Ministry of Health contract, so we're up to 191 hospitals. And we also have worked with over 68 colleges and universities across Canada and the US. We are an approved CANU and OECM supplier, and we're very proud to announce that we've been re-awarded the contract with Sourcewell, and we're the highest ranked proponent in our category. There's also a sister company to Roth IAMS called Slam Technologies. You may have seen it before if you've worked with us. You may have seen our site assessors using it on site to collect data. There's a few different modules to it. There's a SLAM CAP, which is for capital planning and keeping your building condition assessment data up to date. And then we've also got SLAM Equip, which is going to help you collect the information on your asset inventory for your CMMS system. And then there's SLAM Prevent, which is going to help you with building out your preventative maintenance plans. So we'll hop into today's topic, which is how do you decide what deferred capital, renewal, and maintenance issues you're going to address. So before we talk about how you prioritize that backlog, we'll talk about some considerations that you need to talk through beforehand. So first, we want to understand how much money you have. Hopefully, you know what funding you have for the year. If you're really lucky, you might be able to see how much funding you have 2 or 3 years out. But we want to understand what resources are available to us. And then once we understand what budget we have, we want to make sure that we take whatever considerations we need to off the top. So you might have some allowances. One of the common ones that we see is asbestos. If you're working with a building that was from the era of asbestos, you know it's in your buildings, you know it's going to come up when you do capital work. So maybe you set aside an envelope of money just for dealing with that as you go through capital work. That's just one example of an allowance you might have. And then there's always going to be non-condition related needs that you're going to address that are going to affect how you prioritize work. So a great example of this is if you have an older building that's in a rough state of repair, but you know that you're going to be divesting or demolishing that building either this year or in the near future, that's going to affect how you maintain that building. Maybe you're running it to failure, or maybe you're just doing the bare minimum to sort of nurse it along until you're ready for demolition. Same thing with renovations. If you're doing a major renovation, whether it be a wing or an entire building, you're going to be replacing all the components within that building regardless of condition, because the opportunity is there to do it all during the major renovation. So this again it's not a comprehensive list. These are just some considerations before you get into prioritizing that deferred capital and renewal maintenance backlog. So once we've considered taken those considerations, we want to take a look at the condition. So many of you have likely undergone building condition assessments, whether you've done them through a third party or you've hired Roth IAMS to come and do it on site, or you're collecting that data internally with your own staff. But with the Roth IAMS approach, we're going to come on site, boots on the ground, walk through all of your buildings. We're going to create an element inventory. And so when I say element, I'm talking about all the components within your building, your HVAC, your roof, your doors, your windows, your flooring, all of that. Everything is going to be given a condition rating, as well as there's going to be costing guidelines. So if there's any recommended work for improvement, then you'll have some costing guidelines along with it, so you understand what it's going to cost when that element replacement comes due. So when we do a building condition assessment, all it's doing is creating a list of needs for your organization. It's very important to understand that that is not a capital plan. And so the reason that we say this is because if you've undergone building condition assessments before in the past, you've probably received a very lengthy list of capital work to be completed. And you likely probably don't have a budget to get through all of it. And so what I don't want to see is for you to just sort of knock your way down the list of work to be done, run out of money partway through. That's not going to be the most impactful way to spend your capital dollars. And so for that reason, we say that the building conditions assessments are not a capital plan. They're definitely going to be used to create your capital plan. They're definitely going to inform the capital plan, but don't expect that to be the solution. You also need to have an effective strategy to keep this building condition assessment up to date. So you might have some software that allows you to do that, or you might be managing it through Excel. Doesn't matter, but when the second you're given that building condition assessment, that data is now aging. The second you do any work in your building, that building condition assessment data is no longer up to date, and you're no longer making decisions off of defensible data. So we want to have a strategy there in place to make sure that you're updating it as you go along, so you're always working off of current information. So we've got our first poll question here, which I'll pass it off to Amanda because I can't see from my end.
Okay, folks, these are the first poll questions we'd like you to answer. So how is your organization currently choosing what work to do? So whoever is the loudest gets their work done, and we all know that happens. We use a risk-based matrix. We fix things as they break. Whoever has the most influence gets their work done, or none of the above. So we'll give you a couple minutes to submit your answers, and then we'll see what the results are. Okay, so a few more coming in. So give it another minute. They're still changing. Okay, so yeah, whoever is the loudest gets their work done, which is only at 7%. So it's good to know that not everyone is operating that way. It looks like the highest ranked one is people use a risk-based matrix at 41%, fix
Right?
things as they break at 29%. Whoever has the most influence gets their work done is at 18%. And then the other two, whoever's the loudest gets their work done is 6%, and none of the above is 6%. So looks like a lot of people are using a risk-based matrix, Alicia.
That's great. And one potential answer I probably should have included on there was a categorical system, like a high, medium, low, which might be getting rolled into the risk-based matrix a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit about the most common systems we see being done for picking work. And then we'll sort of talk about how we can evolve after that. So if you've had building condition assessments done, you've probably received back categorical priority. This might look like urgent, high, medium, low. The problem with using categorical priority as your only system is that you likely, as an organization, don't even have enough funds to get through the list of urgent requirements. So again, what I don't want to see is you just work your way through the list until you run out of money. That's not going to be the most impactful way to spend your capital dollars. So then, the question becomes, okay, which high priority or which urgent priority is higher than urgent? How do we decide amongst the most critical items, which work do we do when we don't have enough funds to complete all of it? So the next system that we often see, and based off of the poll, it seems like a lot of you are using a risk management system, which is great. So here's just a super simplistic version of it. There's definitely more complicated versions out there, but essentially you're just going to take the likelihood of failure and you're going to multiply that by the consequence of failure. And that's going to return a priority back to you between 1 and 25. So if the likelihood of failure, let's say it's a brand new element, obviously the likelihood of failure is going to be pretty low versus, 5 would be something that's past expected useful life. Maybe your technicians or mechanics are sort of nursing this component along, whether it be a roof or HVAC or whatever. And then we're going to multiply that by the consequence of failure. So 1 would be something that's just a nuisance. This would be things like, paint, carpet, not a big deal. It's a nuisance. It's aesthetically not nice, but not the end of the world. Versus if we talk about something with a 5 consequence of failure, you're looking at the risk of people dying. You're looking at a full building closure. So, if you're up in the northern region and it's minus 30 and your heating goes out, that's going to cause a building closure. It might cause water pipes to break. If we're talking about a stadium with structural concerns, consequence of failure is going to be very high in that scenario. So a traditional risk management model is great. It's just not everything. There's likely more considerations beyond just risk that are coming into your decision making. It's definitely very important. I'm not saying don't use risk management. I'm just saying you need, we can take it a step further, which takes me into the next poll question.
Okay. So I believe this poll question. Okay, this is an open-ended one. What are some considerations beyond risks that impact your organization's decisions about what work to complete? So if you just want to type in there, what will happen is this poll question answer will appear as a word cloud, and we can see what folks are considering. Okay, so far it looks like programming of the client, space programming. Ooh, lots up there now. Customer satisfaction, space programming, mandates from funders, financial priorities and mandates, programming of the client. So I think that we've got 5 responses. Doesn't look like any, 6 responses anymore coming in. Oh, here we go. More people. Customer satisfaction. Financial seems to be a big one as it's bolded.
Yeah, so these are all great answers. I mean, disruptions is obviously a big one. Customer satisfaction. You know, most of everyone on here is dealing with some degree of public use within their buildings, whether it be students or community centers or whatever. And then mandates from funders, you know, you might be getting different grants or opportunities and you're trying to capitalize on that available funding.
Okay. There you go.
So we'll talk about some of the ones that we see. You guys had some great ideas. So again, beyond just a risk matrix, there's other factors coming into play. So how do we balance that out with a risk matrix? What other factors are driving your institution? This could be impact to users. So, you know, is a community center more important than a fire hall, or is a fire hall more important than a library? Is a student center more important than a lab? How do we sort of compare assets against each other? Sorry, getting into the asset criticality. So that fire hall versus lab versus library. Impact to users is more sort of what I had intended with that bullet point was more, you know, if you're trying to draw new students to your organization, you need, you know, your student center to be in, you know, aesthetically pleasing, in tip-top shape. It's going to have a higher level of care than maybe, you know, administrative building. Same thing if you're a municipality, your community center is probably a higher priority to you than, you know, some of your other centers, or a rec center might be higher priority because of the high public use. Sustainability and energy efficiency. So this has been a big topic lately. Everyone's trying to reach net zero. There's also a lot of grant and funding tied to this. So it's going to be a big consideration. You know, you're going to be looking for opportunities to capitalize on sustainability while you're tackling that deferred capital renewal maintenance backlog. Code compliance. This could be accessibility would be a great example of this. So if you're trying to whether you're an organization that's just trying to be more accessible, or whether you have mandates or regulations that are forcing you to become accessible. Like if you're in Ontario, everyone's trying to reach AODA before the deadline. That'd be a great example of code compliance. So making sure that you capture those accessibility upgrades as you're going through your capital planning. And then community needs. So a lot of this is going to tie in. A lot of you mentioned space use. That's going to tie into community needs for sure. And you know, you're trying to utilize the space as well as you can. And any space that has high community needs is going to need to be inviting and aesthetically pleasing. Again, this is not an extensive list. It's just some of the key ones that we see come up during conversations as we work through the multivariable prioritization, and some of the things that you guys are trying to juggle and balance on top of just that risk management, that risk matrix. So the Roth IAMS multivariable prioritization. This is our approach and our methodology, and we'll get into what that process looks like in just a second. But there is a couple of different ways that we can offer this service out to clients. So if you are a SlamCap user, our multivariable prioritization tool is already built into the software and available to you. You are able to go in and configure it yourself. That's an exercise you could do right now in 10 minutes if you wanted to. However, if you want help on filling it out and configuring it, that service is available. Or if you are not a SlamCap user, we can also do this exercise as an Excel-based deliverable. So you definitely do not have to have a license for SlamCap in order to be able to use the multivariable prioritization tool. We can do this in Excel. It just means that we would need you to provide us the Excel sheet of your list of needs. So whether that be an export from your whatever capital planning software you're using, or maybe you received an Excel as part of your billing condition assessment deliverable. That's all that's required on that end of things. So the Roth IAMS, if we're leading the workshop for you, or if we're helping you to build out the multivariable prioritization, it's a half-day workshop that we run. It can be done virtually, but I strongly recommend that you do it in person if you are able to, only because, you know, the nature of doing this online is that you don't have people's full attention. You know, they're getting emails, they're distracted, they tune out. Versus if we do this all together, sit in a boardroom, you know, bang it out on the whiteboard, you'll get a lot more engagement out of your key stakeholders, and you'll find the session to be a lot more beneficial. We do encourage you to bring as many stakeholders to the table as possible. So the reason for that is because it's going to give people an in-depth understanding of how decisions get made for your organization. Part of this process is getting everybody to agree on what the priorities are. So we're looking for 5 to 7 priorities that are driving your organization, and we're going to assign weightings and categories to all those priorities. That needs to be agreed upon before we leave the room. And so if you invite all of your key stakeholders to that session, they all get a seat at the table, they all get to contribute ideas, they all get to understand how decisions are getting made moving forward, which means that when, you know, down the road, they come back and they say, well, why did you do their work and not mine? You know, they can't argue with the MVP because they were in the room, they were part of the process, and they agreed to the same weightings and categories as everybody else. So this is just kind of shows the process with us. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for 5 to 7 categories we find is the sweet spot for prioritization. 2 of those are going to get taken up by risk management categories. And then you have the ability to apply prioritization either at the asset level. So that's that, you know, libraries versus fire halls, or you can do it at the element level. So elements would be the components within your building. So this would be, you know, is a roof more important than windows, that sort of thing. We're going to have everyone agree on weightings and scorings for the prioritization for each category before they leave the room. They don't get to see how it rolls out until later. So it's great to get everybody to agree on the prioritization without sort of seeing the how it shakes out at the end of the day, because we don't want that to be influencing your decisions over prioritization. And again, the goal here is to create buy-in amongst your stakeholders. So after the half-day workshop, that's when it gets handed off to my data management team. They're going to take those weightings and scorings. They're going to apply it against your list of recommendations, as well as your elements based off of Uniformat. So what's going to happen is you will get back a score between 1 and 100 against all of your recommendations. This is a capital planning tool. Again, it's not a capital plan, but it is going to be a tool to help you make decisions regarding your capital plan. It's here for decision-making support. It's here to back you up when people question why you've chosen certain work over others. In terms of how we can deliver that MVP to you, if you already have SlamCap, the tool is in there. We can configure it, or you can configure it. Doesn't matter to us. If you don't have SlamCap, we're happy to do it as an Excel-based exercise. And then we always do this based off of Uniformat, which just makes it really easy to roll the information up and down, and it makes that capital planning side of things a lot more user-friendly. And I think we've covered most of the benefits of the MVP already. It's going to get that buy-in. It's going to get alignment amongst your team on what work to do. It's going to create transparency over decisions, how decisions are made. And at the end of the day here, the goal is always to get you defensible data. So here is just two examples of what a prioritization, like what a priority to a category might be. So again, with the top example here, this is an example of a priority that we're applying at the building level or the asset level. So in this example, and this is completely fictitious, but in this example, we're basing it off of public usage. So if we look at the subcategory, if a space is back office, it only has a score of 10, versus if it has direct usage by the public year round, it's getting a score of 100. Your score does not need to add up to 100. You can assign it any value between 1 and 100. And then each category is going to receive a weighting. So you'll have, again, we're working towards 5 to 7 categories. Each of those 5 to 7 categories will get a weighting. The weighting will equal up to 100. And that's going to roll out that prioritization between 1 and 100. So on the second example down below, this is an example of a prioritization that you could apply at the element level. So here we're talking about that risk management component. Here we're talking about the consequence of failure. So if it's a fire and life safety issue, it has a score of 100. If it's a nuisance, then it's only got a score of 10. And then the weighting of consequence of failure is 30 versus public usage only has a weighting of 15. So this is only 2 examples of the 5 to 7 we would look to have your organization agree on by the end of the half-day workshop. But again, these categories could be anything. So a lot of the times we'll see energy savings potential. That would be an example that we would see on the element level. Accessibility is another one. Future use potential is another one. So we did this exercise for one of the local municipalities, and they had a very large portfolio of buildings that they knew they were going to have to downsize the portfolio, but they hadn't yet decided which buildings they were keeping and which buildings they were getting rid of. So one of their categories at the asset level was the future use potential. So, how much is the building have low use now, but high future use potential? Does it have high use now and high future use potential? Does it have high use now, but low future use potential? And that's what their subcategories looked like. And that helped them to sort of decide where to invest across their assets until they fully determine which assets they were planning to divest from. So this is just a screenshot out of SlamCap, and it's just here to show you what that MVP score looks like when you roll it out. So you'll get back that number between 1 and 100. Again, it's not your capital plan, but at least now you have a place to start in terms of deciding what deferred capital or renewal maintenance that you want to look at doing for your capital plan. So you'll see here that the highest score is an 81, and that's for their hot water boilers in the L building. So you're going to get back that numerical value between 0 and 100. It's going to help you sort of compare projects against each other and relative importance for the organization. And the goal here is that if you only had $1 to spend towards your deferred capital and renewal maintenance backlog, how do I make that $1 as impactful as possible? So some considerations here, as great as the MVP tool is, if you do not have an effective strategy to keep your building condition assessment data up to date, it's not going to help you. It needs good data to work off of in order to help you inform your decisions. The other consideration here is that it is, again, it's a tool, it's not a capital plan. So we don't recommend that you just take, rank your recommendations by MVP and then see how far down the list you can get before you run out of money. There's always going to be reasons why you might override the MVP. A great example of that is roofing programs. So, you might have economies of scale if you replace multiple roofs at once. So you might find yourself replacing roofs that don't necessarily rank super high on the MVP, but you're going to do it because the economies of scales of doing it as a group project, the benefits outweigh the MVP, right? So there's always going to be reasons why that MVP number is not going to instantly qualify something to your capital plan. It's just a tool to help support your decision making. You do need the engagement of all your stakeholders and departments in order for this tool to be successful. You need that buy-in so that you can, have the ability to go through and make your decisions without people constantly coming back and questioning why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing what you're doing. So just one last little tidbit before we get to the questions here. And if you've seen us at conferences, if you follow us on LinkedIn, if you've attended a webinar, I'm sure you've seen this slide before. It's our keep calm and don't say deferred maintenance. So you may have noticed on this presentation, I've been using the term deferred capital renewal and maintenance. And the reason that we've been doing that is because most of what you are encompassing in your deferred maintenance is not actually maintenance at all. Most of it is actually capital renewal. And when you use the term deferred maintenance, you're undermining the work that your facility managers are trying to do. And when you go to advocate for more funding and non-facility folks see the term deferred maintenance, they can't wrap their head around it. The second that you change the conversation to capital renewal, that's something that they can't understand, because in reality, we're talking about replacing roofs, we're talking about replacing HVAC. We're not talking about doing some maintenance work on units for the most part. So you don't have to use the term deferred capital renewal maintenance. That's what Roth IAMS has landed on. I've heard a number of great ideas from other organizations, but we do strongly encourage that you move away from the term deferred maintenance and find something that better reflects the issue at hand. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. If you have not checked out our website before, I strongly encourage you to. The QR code will take you to our thought leadership page. There's recordings there from past webinars, as well as blog posts and a ton of information for facility folks. And if you don't follow us on LinkedIn, that's how you can stay up to date on sort of what conferences we're attending and what webinars we're hosting in the future. And then you can always connect with me directly at my email, or my cell phone number is there as well. I'm always happy to help knowledge share what we've seen from other organizations, or answer any questions on what Roth IAMS does and sort of how our services can help your organization.
Okay, we have the final and survey questions that are appearing. So yeah, if anyone does have any questions, put them in the chat and we'll share them with Alicia and get them answered. Not seeing anything else come up, Alicia, as far as questions.
No problem. Okay. If anybody has questions in the future, or they want to see a more in-depth example of multivariable prioritization, I'm happy to jump on a call. Just shoot me an email or a text, and I'm happy to set that up with you. Other than that, thanks for giving me some of your time today and attending our webinar.
Great, then as we said earlier, we will be sending out the deck and the recording link to everyone following the webinar. So no questions. Thanks to everyone for attending, and we'll see you on our next webinar on March 27th.
Thank you.
Thanks.